numb and my heart's feeling heavy. Got anxiety in my blood, but I'm about to get ready to talk about it and ashamed of the way that my mind works straight, flexing like a nature. Got a lot of things on my mind, got a lot of things to pursue. Ain't no stigma gonna stop me from reaching my potential. What a nice view.
All right, Julia. Well, thank you so much for coming on Talk Mental Health with Logan Noon. This is really cool. I've been following your Instagram page now for a long time. Like, I've tried to connect with as many mental health advocates as I can, and I've really always liked your work and, you know, the message that you try to put out there. So what really inspired you, though, to start Julia Lives Bipolar, your, you know, Instagram name or whatever we call it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on. You've been on my radar for probably like over a year now, and I've been dying to do this, and it's just really nice to connect. So I started my Instagram about a year and a half ago now. I had I didn't know I had bipolar disorder when I had a psychotic break 5 years ago. I'd been kind of trying to deal with the symptoms for years. And I had a really big manic episode that threw me into a bipolar psychotic break. And I was hospitalized. I spent a night in the ER and then a week in a psych ward and then a month in an aftercare program. And then my friends and family were there to like really support me. And I ended up moving back in with my parents and not really working for about 8 months until about 8 months after I was hospitalized. So I like really had some time to recover, and I really needed that time. But from the moment I got out of the psych ward, I knew I had a story to tell. This was something that I never met anybody else who had been through what I'd been through.
Yeah.
And but the numbers just didn't make any sense, because like according to online sources, like 3% or something like 1.5% of people have bipolar disorder, or maybe it's 3%, and like 1.5% have had a psychotic break. And I was like, I know a lot of people, like I should know people who have been through this. So like, that means that there are definitely people that I know who have gone through this, but just aren't talking about it.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to write a book all the way back then, and that's a huge task. And through my work, I learned how to use Instagram, and eventually it just kind of clicked, and I was like, oh my God, like this is how I'm gonna like connect with people about it, like on a large scale. And so I started it a year and a half ago.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's really funny. Like, the statistics of bipolar disorder kind of was a big motivator for you, because that was actually similar to me as well. At least when I first started, when I made that decision, like, okay, I want to tell people publicly online about my bipolar disorder. You know, my parents were really nervous. My therapist was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And I was just like, listen, like, I thought it was about 4%. I don't know exactly what the true number is, but I was like, 4% of people out there have bipolar disorder. At the time, I think I had, I don't know, let's just call it 1,000 friends on Facebook. So I was like, okay, 40 people have to have similar experiences. I was like, this has to work out. But so I guess before we kind of get into the whole story of, you know, your experiences with bipolar disorder, let's give the listeners an idea of like who Julia is today. So you're 30 years old and you live in Seattle, correct? And what do you do for work?
Yeah, so I work in fashion. Traditionally, like my entire career, I kind of work in sales, and in the last 3 years, I got into fashion because that's what I really like. And right now, I'm working kind of almost full time for a women's rental clothing company called Armoire, and Armoire.styles, their email. You know, that's a free plug for them, but I just love them. They're just I was a client of theirs. I was a customer. Like I was a member of their subscription clothing kind of deal, because I wear clothes all the time and I'm a professional working woman. That's what they do. And I just liked them so much, and I knew that they were growing, and I kept hearing this like buzz that they were growing, and I asked to be a part of their team. So I've been growing into a full-time role with them, which has been really, really rewarding because it's a team that fits for me. But what I do with them is I am an online stylist, and then I work in their operations department and handle like checking in dry cleaning and like tagging things and just like really hands-on work. And then the last part that I just started, which is the most exciting for me, is I'm doing their digital marketing. So I do their Instagram, like all their social stuff, pretty much.
Okay. Okay. And that's where you kind of got that expertise that you applied to being a mental health advocate. Okay. Very cool.
Yeah, I actually learned that before this job, but like
Okay.
it helped me go into this, like for sure, and helped me grow. I learned it
Cool.
in fashion.
So I thought that's awesome. I didn't realize you worked in fashion and then you also do this really mental health advocacy on the side. And why I say that is I see you, you know, I follow your Instagram pages and it seems like you do so much for the mental health community. You know, I know you put on that Kissed by God documentary about Andy Irons with I believe you worked with NAMI, right? The National Alliance of Mental
Yeah,
Illness.
I got NAMI Washington. Well, it was really easy because I was like, "Can I give you money?" And they were like, "Yes, please." So
Yeah.
they partnered with me on it, and they were so helpful. They knew how to do all the techie stuff. But yeah, I do a lot because it's my passion, like mental health stuff. I mean, I've kind of told my parents this before, like if I like won the lottery, like I would just quit my job and do advocacy stuff.
Okay.
Because I just really like to do it. I haven't figured out how to make a lot of money off of it though.
Yeah, no, it's definitely challenging and I kind of almost I have that same passion, and that's what led me really to make a change from working in insurance to now pursuing being a physician. Just because I really looked at it as I wanted to work with patients because I wanted to either be a therapist or maybe a psychiatrist. But at least initially, I thought advocacy was going to be what I wanted to do. I thought about maybe trying to start my own nonprofit or maybe like a gym that was specific for people with mental health conditions. But I just, I didn't have any money to back myself to start a kind of nonprofit or crazy idea like that. So it was just really challenging. So how do you really stay balanced with managing kind of a career that's totally unrelated to mental health? Well, I guess I shouldn't say totally unrelated, but managing a career in fashion with also your passion for mental health advocacy at the time. Like, do you find yourself sometimes spending too much time on mental health advocacy and sacrificing sleep or sacrificing well-being?
Well, so the advocacy comes out of a place of like excitement. So usually it's work that's burning me out, and like advocacy is kind of like the fun thing. And I've actually been like posting a lot less in the last, I'd have to say, quarter or two because I have been working more.
Yeah.
But I still do what I can, and I know that it'll come in waves. I've been doing it kind of long enough, and in the long run, like, I mean, my kind of goal, like, I don't want to start a nonprofit. I actually did get into USC social work program. I was thinking about being a social worker, and I started that last year, and I burnt out within a month because I was just triggered all the time, and I realized I can't work in mental health. I have to have a career outside of mental health to like keep me grounded, and then I can dip into like my hard places like when I have the energy.
Yeah. Well, that's really good that you had the mental awareness to realize like, this isn't going to be a healthy career for me, because I think a lot of people have that notion like, oh, I could be a great therapist and all this stuff, and they don't have the awareness though that they are self-triggered by the work, and then they just push through, and we see extremely high rates of burnout in all mental health professionals. It's extremely sad.
Yeah, I tried, but it's really exhausting work, but also really honorable work. Like, I really really admire the people who do it, and like the professionals that I do know and that I really respect. Like, they're just amazing.
So have you ever considered, or, I know there are organizations out there that sort of blend mental health advocacy and fashion?
So this is something that's really hard for me because I have been, especially when I was like really building my Instagram, like last year, I was really in a big groove. I had a big following coming, like watching all my stuff. I got a lot of people asking me if I would rep their shirts, their t-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had to really think about it. Like, do I want to the reason why I tell my stories in such an elaborate way is because I think that things aren't really black and white, and it's not super simple. And I love explaining the nuances and the feelings. And I think that a t-shirt can really simplify things a little bit too much. So I had to like sadly kind of put my foot down and just tell people, no, I'm really sorry, I can't like rep your fashion thing. Like I hope it works out for you, but I'm just not your girl.
Mm-hmm.
So fashion, like that, I mean, there's always a place for fashion because any in-person event I do, I'm going to look amazing at, right?
Of course. You work in fashion. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but there's always like, there could be, a fashion show for awareness or, could be, actually, I know people who have done that before and it's been really successful. So yeah, I think it's a happy marriage because it's a very like creative outlet. It's a very creative field and there's artists involved, and I don't know, I feel like bipolar people are really creative too.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever considered maybe even creating your own fashion line that highlights mental health, or is that just something that, like you said, you'd almost rather do a fashion benefit show, whatever it may be, to benefit and highlight mental health?
Yeah, I feel like there's going to be something that comes along in the future that I'm going to be like, that's it. I just haven't really found it yet. That's kind of how I do all my projects, like even the Andy Irons Kissed by God, that came across me because I had a follower named B Money. He messaged me, and he's a really nice guy, but he just kind of brought that movie to my attention, and I was like, that's what I've been looking for. And like, I don't really go out seeking things, I just kind of let things unfold, and I think that's like the best strategy for me, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I find at least myself with my fashion choices, obviously I'm extremely like you, very open about my bipolar disorder, but it's not like I own any t-shirts that say like bipolar and proud, or, I know those exist, but I don't know.
I think it's just maybe the only printed thing that I own is like a Washington State Ferry like shirt, and that's just my personal style. That I just don't really go for the printed stuff. But yeah, I'm not like against it. Like, it's just not I'm a fashionista. Like, that's just not my style.
Yeah, and well, it's good that you recognize it. And what I find, at least what I do a lot with my fashion to try to highlight mental health, is I really like the accent of like the neon green, how neon green is supposed to represent mental health. So, a lot of it, especially like my athletic gear, I have like neon green accents or whatever it may be. Or I just find myself like having an affinity towards this color now because it does mean something so much different to me than just like a color that I like.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like I'm totally different than a lot of people in that way, and I'm like this undercover bipolar girl. Like, I live my normal everyday life, and then if it comes up in conversation, then like, yeah, like I'm bipolar. Like, that's my advocacy, is just being a person who has bipolar disorder. Like, I don't feel like.
Well, I think it's also, I didn't actually notice this until I was kind of researching your page even further today, but you have a Julia Lives Bipolar page, but then also sort of your, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here, like normal Instagram page. And like, I do think that is really important for proper balance. And one thing that I don't do, like I only have one page. So sometimes it feels like my mental advocacy is my entire social media feed, or it sometimes even feels like my entire work outside of medical school kind of thing. Okay, so I'll say now what I'd like to kind of have us get into is sort of like the story of your bipolar disorder. So like, when did you start having, mental health challenges or really symptoms of your bipolar disorder before you even were diagnosed?
Well, my parents say like when I was growing up, I always had a lot of anxiety, but they didn't really recognize it. They kind of wish that they had seen it more, but I did. I had a lot of anxiety growing up. I was always kind of perfectionist. There was definitely nights when I would be like studying all night and stuff like that, but I kind of like thrived in school. And then when I went to college, I went abroad for my first semester. I actually got into USC undergrad second semester. So my first semester was spent on semester at sea abroad. It was just literally a cruise ship full of juniors and seniors in college and me.
Okay.
And taking classes and then partying our asses off.
Of course.
And I went totally alone, but I met friends on the ship, but I was so depressed the entire trip. I gained a lot of weight and I started smoking cigarettes. Like I had already kind of smoked cigarettes, but I started chain smoking cigarettes when I was 18 on that trip.
Okay.
And yeah, I definitely experienced a lot of, just serious depression, but when I went home, it kind of like normalized when I was around my people again, and I wasn't in that environment anymore, drinking my face off.
Yeah.
And then I went to USC for about a year and a half, and then I ended up transferring to be with my boyfriend at the time, who we'd been together for a very long time, since we were like 13 years old.
Oh wow.
And he was on football scholarship at Wazoo in Pullman, Washington State University.
Okay.
And so I transferred to be with him because I was definitely having some symptoms, but I was like really just depressed and I felt really lonely, even though I had a lot of friends there. And I was kind of struggling in school, and I was just like, well, it would save me a lot of money to just not go to USC and go to Wazoo.
Yeah.
And so we decided, and he had ulcerative colitis, and he still does. And so he was really struggling, and he had to quit football. And so we were just both having like kind of a really hard time in college.
Yeah.
And like, let's just, live together. So I transferred to the guffaw of all my friends and family. And I transferred to be with him and just live a little bit more low key. And Wazoo is easier. But what's great there is that, well, I was really depressed because I felt lonely again. I didn't really have a lot of friends there, but I got to really focus on school. Like that was my outlet because I didn't really have a sport anymore. I wasn't playing sports in college.
Yeah.
And so I was focusing on school, and this professor like noticed that like how good I was at school, and he was like, "Why aren't you in the honors program?" And I was like, there's an honors program? And so he took me under his wing and basically taught me a lot of what I know about writing over a couple years. But he one time just pulled me aside during one of our meetings and just said that he could tell I was not really doing very well, and that I might benefit from seeing somebody like at the school therapy clinic. I was like, I'd kind of started wearing like my pajamas to school, and I was asking for extensions, kind of having like panic attacks. And like, I was a really good student. I didn't really ask for extensions ever. And I was asking for extensions, and he could probably just see the panic in my eyes. And I could barely keep my eyes open because I was so tired.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I went to the school therapist, and she took a look at me and was just like, "You look depressed. Like, you look very depressed." And from what you're telling me, after our therapy session, she was like, she just therapied me, but then she really suggested that I go to see a doctor because it seemed like I might have clinical depression.
Now, in this in this really height of depression, when you were at Wazoo, I know when you first started experiencing some depression on that study abroad experience, you were partying and boozing. Now, during the senior year of college, when you first started seeking out therapy, were you self-medicating with alcohol, or were you being relatively healthy in that respect?
No. I mean, yeah, I was self-medicating for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love alcohol. So like I was drinking a lot. Also, now it's like what? I'm 30 years old. I think I might be allergic to weed because
Hmm.
even when I haven't smoked for like over 5 years. I stopped smoking like weed before I even had my psychotic break when I was 25. But I get like my eyes get puffy and like I get really irritable when I just smell weed
Hmm.
around it. So I was smoking a lot of weed back then, and that was not good.
Okay.
So yes, I was definitely self-medicating. And then when I went to the doctor, from what I remember, it felt like I was in there for no more than 10 minutes. And she just listened to me. She's nice, but she was just like, well, it sounds like you could be bipolar. And she didn't really explain much about it. And she, prescribed me some medication. And I just kind of left being like, whoa, maybe I'm bipolar.
Huh.
And then and I think she suspected that because when I was doing my papers, I was staying up at night and just not sleeping a
Yeah.
lot. And I was like super perfectionist about my stuff.
And
But
was this a primary care physician or was this a psychiatrist?
this was a primary care through the school.
Okay.
As far as I know, she might have been a specialist, but it was through the school, whatever it was.
Okay.
And then so when I talked to my parents about it, my dad had a visceral reaction, and he was just like, I don't know, like, don't you think it's worth it maybe to get a second opinion, which I think is a valid like thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where like as a family we kind of wish we had done this differently. They kind of left me to my own devices. They didn't really know what to do or to take it seriously, and like I was just kind of like, well, I don't know what to do. And I found like a psychologist that was off campus. And I don't know, I just Googled somebody and I just went to him. Like there was no referrals, there was no anything like that. And he ran me through all these tests, and he told me at the end of it that I was very, very sensitive, and that I'm probably not bipolar, and that I should really just take care of myself, make sure to work out, eat healthy, meditate, like not drink, just like take care of my body and my mind will follow.
Yeah.
And so I was like, woo, thank God I'm not bipolar,
Nice.
throw that prescription. And so that was when I was 21, and I lived for the next 4 years of my life just struggling with depression.
Well, so let's pause here for a second and I want to ask you a few questions just because sometimes it seems like your family obviously wanted to really help, but they just didn't really know how. So your family was living about 2 hours away from you at this time, right?
4.
Oh, 4 hours. Oh, okay. Okay, my bad. So yeah, they were pretty far away. And then does mental illness run at all in your family? Like, were they familiar with any of this kind of stuff?
It's suspected to run in my family. Nobody else has been diagnosed except for my dad's one of 6, and it probably comes from his side.
Yeah.
And nobody has been diagnosed as far as I know. They're a very disconnected family. And so there's a lot of like assumptions and like maybe my grandma was bipolar. We don't really know. And so I think the like lesson for all of us through all of this was that like, yes, even if we suspected that it ran in the family, like we needed to do a little bit more digging. Nobody had ever really handled it before.
Okay.
Like I think there were siblings of his, like maybe my aunts who had depression, and then handled the depression part of it. But bipolar was like a little taboo.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So you went to that second psychologist, and they told you, no, you don't have bipolar disorder. Just take care of yourself. And then, so what happened next?
Well, for the next, like, after college, I graduated. During that time, I called my parents, like, I think before I had even gone to the doctor, and was like, I'm quitting school. Like, I almost dropped out of school. And they just begged me to please just finish my degree. I was so close, like, just a few more months. And so I did. And I'm glad that I did. But when I was done, moved home, I was living with my parents and I got my first job. And I did great at my first job. It was a sales job. And I was just.
And was it in fashion?
No, this was like random sales.
Okay.
And I did really well, like because I was always like a kind of a alpha, like salesperson, like had to win.
Mm-hmm. And you were an athlete growing up too, right? So you kind of had that like drive.
Very athletic, yeah. And so, but like that was like my hypomania. Like
Okay.
I was kind of dropped, like I was really depressed at the end of college, and then I got home and I was like around my friends and my family, and I had a job and I had new work friends and I was succeeding at my job, and I just kind of like went the next few years like just kind of riding like little kind of slopes. And like at the time I didn't realize that they were little depressions or little hypomanias or big depressions. Even like I was experiencing all these things as an experience without understanding what they were.
Yeah.
Like I might have said like, yeah, I'm depressed, but I didn't really think I was like actually depressed. I thought that like I just needed to like eat more vegan, or like I don't know, like I had so many little things. I was seeing a psychic at one point. Like
okay.
I was going to the chiropractor all the time. Like I was just trying all these things to try and fix something that I wouldn't acknowledge.
Yeah, and it sounded like you were able to recognize, even in those moments, though, something was going on. Like, you went to a psychic, a chiropractor, but, it was very difficult at that time to really recognize that it potentially was a psychiatric underlying issue. So really,
I
when...
did even go to a therapist again one time, but
okay.
I'm sure that she was like, I call them woo-woo, like in Seattle, we call it like woo-woo, like...
Yeah.
Kind of Eastern, and I made sure it was that because that's the kind of leanings I had at the time. I mean, she didn't recognize, like she didn't suggest I go to a doctor.
Okay. So when did you really recognize that, when did quote unquote shit hit the fan? When did really all this kind of come crashing down and you realized that you needed, significant medical care?
Yeah. So, when I was about 24, I was living in Seattle and a relationship was ending. I wanted to leave my job. My world was coming crashing down on me. I felt so alone. I was just experiencing a really intense depression. I thought about committing suicide more than I ever had before, or even once. That was like the closest I ever came. I didn't attempt, but I was having ideation, like,
yeah.
And I was like, I need a change. And because that's my solution, is always to change. And so I moved to San Francisco, where some of my friends were. And I just had a roller coaster adventure there. And I got a job, I got an apartment, I was around my friends, I was partying, I was exploring, I was like meeting new people. San Francisco is like the gold rush of our age, like the tech rush. There's so many people down there doing fun stuff. And so I was just living it up. And after about a year of that, I'd kind of like fallen in love with this guy. And he did not want to have a relationship with me, even though he wanted to kind of be with me. And I didn't understand that at all. And it broke my heart. And that heartbreak was really triggered a deep depression that led into the biggest mania of my life. The mania ramped over a course of about 3 months. I was acting really strange for about kind of 6 months though, because I was acting really weird in my depression. It was maybe like a mixed episode or something.
Yeah.
And I went into like a clear manic drive for like 3 months. And it ended when I was on a girls' trip. My girlfriends, we get together every year, some of them from high school. And we go to a different place every year. This time we went to Austin, Texas. And when I got there for the weekend, I was just a different person. And like in my mind, like I was just following an energy. I was just following this energy around that like kind of had control over me. And by the end of it, I had ditched my friends and got myself into some really scary situations. And my friends were so mad at me, and they just could not understand what the hell had gotten into me. And I ended up getting back to San Francisco okay, but I had missed my flight, and I'd already been really weird at work. I was working at a really intense startup, and I did not get along with the CEOs, especially because I was manic.
Yeah.
And so they fired me right when I got home. And then I think I crossed over into a psychotic episode then.
Wow.
When I was walking basically away from my job that had just fired me down near the waterfront. And I was walking up towards my apartment in Russian Hill, and I flipped into psychosis. And yeah, it was really intense. And one of my friends who, like all of those friends are still my friends, and they felt bad that like they didn't know. And I was like, all I could say is like, I didn't know, like none of us knew. There's no like blame anywhere. I just like specifically remember my best friend like screaming at me on the phone, like, what are you doing? Like, come to brunch. Like, or, what are you going to go off this random guy? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I just was crying over the phone and just saying, I can't, there's something that's pulling me, and I can't explain what it is, but I just have to go, and you have to trust me. And then she was in med school at the time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she was in med school at the time. And about a semester or two later, she took her psych course. And she was like, Jesus, if I had just taken that psych course, before that happened, I would have known. You were textbook.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly. And, it sounds like, just kind of high risk behavior, obviously not yourself, high energy. But even then, like, common people aren't really educated on these sort of issues. And so I totally makes sense that they couldn't really recognize something psychotic was going on, but certainly they were able to recognize that, this wasn't normal Julia kind of thing. So, you flip.
The people who I met, like I met a lot of people on that trip, and luckily nothing happened. Like it didn't do anything that I like really regret, but something could have happened, and that's the scary part. But my friends were like, what's wrong with you? But everybody else that I met was like, you're the coolest person I've ever met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, life of the party, full of energy.
Yeah.
So when though you describe after you got fired that it really hopped from, it just like hopped in intensity kind of thing as you described it. So like, were you starting to have hallucinations, or, what was going on then?
Yeah. So it's like a really bizarre story, and I have like a whole story, like a whole post about it.
And which post is that? So the listeners, if they want to see this, they could follow it easily.
I think it's either Carol. I think it might be Carol part 1.
Okay.
So basically, I met this homeless woman on my walk. And to me, I could tell she was schizophrenic. even though I was like manic or psychotic at the time. I could tell she was schizophrenic, but she just intrigued me because she was like a witch, and I just thought there was like something really like special happening. And so I introduced myself to her, bought her lunch, and we sat and we talked about her experience. And she basically just unloaded her like traumatic history on me and all of her delusions. And it just traumatized me. Like, I'm still traumatized to this day, the things that she told me. But I tried to help her. Like, I thought that she needed a place to stay that night and that she couldn't stay on the street. And so I was trying to find a phone charger for my phone that was dead. And we just like walked around San Francisco for like a couple hours, like looking for a phone, charging my phone, me trying to think of like how I could get her into like a home of some sort or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just ended with me just being, I mean, I was kind of frozen by the end of it. I was like, 3 hours later, I was like, I can barely talk. I'm so exhausted. I don't know what to do. She was kind of starting to ask me if she could like live with me.
Yeah.
And like if I could put her up in a hotel. And I was like, and everywhere we went, I could just tell like people were like, what is happening? But I was also like kind of either super manic or psychotic by this point. And I was having serious delusions. Her delusions were forming my delusions. I like saw a demon and like, yeah, it was just really weird, super weird.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I finally got my phone charged, and by the kindness of the people of San Francisco, like recognizing that I was kind of in trouble and needed some like assistance, somebody helped me charge my phone.
Okay.
And I called a few people until I finally got a hold of somebody, and it was a friend of mine from who I'd met at work a few months back, and he was like, tried to listen to my story and was like, okay, stop. Like, you need to get in a cab or call an Uber, drop Carol off at her stoop, wherever her stoop is, and then you come to your house and I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
And so I did that. And like at the end of the cab ride, I let her off, and her stoop was like blocks away from where I lived. And I didn't told her where I lived. And so I just felt so horrible that this whole time that I'd lived in San Francisco, I never noticed her. Mm-hmm. And so I finally got back, and my friend and my roommate was there too. And they tried to listen to what had happened to me over the last few days, like from the trip to Austin through getting fired, through this experience with this woman. And they were just a little lost. And so they just sat next to me on my bed and had me call my parents, and so I could explain to them. And my mom started crying, and because she just was like, what are you saying? Like, you got fired? Like, what's, and then my dad started yelling at me because he was a financial advisor, and I was trying to explain the way that the economy works to him, which is not a great thing to explain to a financial advisor.
No, certainly not.
What I'm talking about. And, but yeah, it was just like my mind was just going through delusion after delusion after delusion. And so my mom booked me a flight home that night, and she didn't understand that I was that sick, or that I was sick at all. She thought maybe I was really hungover or something,
Yeah.
And she booked me a flight home, and that night I just stayed awake in my bed. I couldn't sleep, and I felt like there was just energy running through me. I had like twitches, and like it was this like otherworldly experience of like twitching. It was really weird. Okay. And then I got up, and I was completely psychotic. I had a hallucination greet me. And then I was just spinning in circles for the next day. And my roommate immediately called my mom and said, she's not getting on that plane. And my mom came down, and my friends that were in the city, I had 2 other really good friends in the city who came and like corralled me for the day. And then they got me to go to the hospital because I kept complaining about my feet feeling like they were on fire. And so my friend Jamie was like, we're going to go get your feet treated.
Well, so now prior to that though, were they suggesting like, "Hey, Julia, let's go to the hospital." And did you have a great amount of resistance to that? And then that's how they kind of said like, "Hey, well, let's go get your feet checked out."
I don't remember.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Why I ask is because when I was in a manic state of mind, going to the hospital was the last thing I want to do. And, thankfully it sounded like you too. I had a really good set of friends and an amazing family that somehow convinced me that going to the hospital was a good idea. They did seek out some professional help and advice to get that, but I'm really thankful that they did do that. So
They did tell me that it was the hospital, but they told me that they needed to get my feet looked at because
okay.
complaining about my feet. And that was, I think they had tried, but it just didn't work. But also, I was completely psychotic. So anything that they said was immediately warped into delusion about something else, which for me was like magical stuff. Like, I was like, oh, we're going to Hogwarts. Like,
Yeah. Just crazy stuff, yeah. Okay, so you finally get to the hospital. You walk into the ER at least thinking that your feet are being checked out, but I'm sure that they were much more concerned with other things that were going on with you. So what was that experience like?
I barely remember it. What I remember is like just having this feeling of like euphoria and thinking that the nurses were like secretly on my side, like they were undercover witches or something.
Okay.
Of course, they were asking me all these mundane questions, but it was so that eventually I could get to the other side. I had this notion that I would be, some door would open at some point and I would be released to like the other side of Hogwarts, not the hospital side.
Yeah. Yeah. And so actually in one of your posts that I really liked, and I actually don't even know if it was this experience, but you talked about how you needed to be restrained at some point, and you specifically said like, fuck your meds or something. Was that this experience or is that something different?
No, this is the same day.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was put into the ER and they told me I was psychotic, and I had a moment of clarity and then it left and I was psychotic again. And I was just kind of bouncing off the walls in there as I was spinning in circles. I tried to escape one time, but it was so secretive that they probably didn't even know. Like I hopped in a garbage can that was a rolling garbage can. There was a janitor who had like just changed the garbage lining.
Uh-huh.
Really hopped in the garbage can and he leaned over and he was like, you can't escape that way.
Yeah. He's like, we see that every week. Get out of here.
Yeah. He was so nice. Like all the nurses felt really bad for me. They were really empathetic. I could just feel they were so nice.
Well, and as crazy as, this story is and, wild and psychotic, it is, like we said earlier, kind of relatively textbook. This is actually something probably that the nurses see probably every single week or something relatively related to it. It's just, and so I'm glad that they handled it so professionally.
I felt like looking back, I felt like they recognized that I was harmless and that I was just like, really having a fun time and like kind of like going through these things, but like I'm not a harmful person. Like I think they could just tell. And so when the day nurses came in, that was a different story. That's when like the manager or whatever who like really needed me to buckle down and take my medication tried her very best, and I would just did not want to have it. And
well, so let's kind of pause here. So when was the first time that someone in the hospital told you like, okay, you have bipolar, you're going through a manic episode and we want to medicate you? And like, what was that like?
It's probably the saddest day of my life, or the saddest moment of my life. I was put in a small room with a two-way mirror in a chair, and this like young Asian doctor came in and she was really nice. And she just explained to me that that they had checked my blood and that there was no drugs in it. So I'd not been drugged. and that I was having a bipolar psychotic break. So that means that I had bipolar disorder, I had a manic episode, and then I broke into a psychosis, which is where I'm just not touching reality anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, come on, like, what are you talking about? Like, I was so frustrated. Like, when am I going to go to the other side? Like, when am I going to go to the other side? And she just looked at me and was like, I'm really sorry that you're going through this. And then she explained it one more time. And she just like connected with me. And I feel like I explain it in my writing, like the world just turned upside down for a moment, or just turned sideways. And I just saw the reality of the situation, that I wasn't in there for any special reason other than the fact that I was literally on my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that I'm Julia Stabler and I'm like out of my fucking mind.
Yeah.
And then I came back and I looked at her and I was like, what school did you even go to?
Show me your diploma, lady.
And she was like, well, I went to Harvard for undergrad.
Oh, no big deal.
Like, I think it was like Cal for grad or something. I don't know. It was something like really reputable, or Stanford or something. I don't know. It was really reputable. And I was like, well, those are really good schools, so fine. And I like walked away. And then I just like became manic again, or psychotic.
Yeah.
I knew that they were trying, like the magic was back. And like, I thought, like my whole concept of Western medicine in my young 20s was that it sucked and that I should try to avoid it at all costs. And that like, I never really took Advil. Like I never took pills.
Okay.
And then here they are trying to feed me medicine, and I just didn't have like an accepting mindset at all.
Yeah. So you had a lot of, resistancy to the psychiatric medication at first. And then did they tell you kind of like, we're not going to let you leave unless you take this, or like, how did that work?
I don't know. It was like, I was on a 72-hour hold, I'm sure, but I was like probably a day before, they really put me down. I was like dancing around a lot. And so I think I was really disturbing the other patients. Like They weren't disturbed. They were just like happy because like I was, being a fool.
Yeah.
And, making the best of the situation, but like in a really ruckus way. And so after a few incidents of them just being like, you can't do that, they try to start making it was like medicine time. And I just like avoided it. And then finally I think I like army crawled into like a room full of patients, and I just jumped up and I started dancing, like thinking I was Jennifer Lawrence in an iPod commercial.
Yeah.
And the head nurse was like, or the head manager was like, that's it, put her in a cell.
Yeah.
And so they put me in a solitary confinement. And the nurses felt bad for me. Like, yeah, they really did. But like, it was her decision, and they put me in there, and this is like the most traumatic part of my whole experience, was that after a while, I really had to pee. And so I had, I was like knocking on the door and saying, hey, I have to go to the bathroom. And nobody would listen. They had like all been instructed to ignore me. And I ended up just peeing in the corner.
Wow.
And then I just had to wait it out until this one really nice guy nurse, he's kind of like an older gentleman. He just like, I could just see in his face, he felt so bad. And he said, just hold tight for 1 second. I'm going to be back to clean it. And he like cleaned up my cell or whatever. I called it a cell because I was in fucking jail.
Yeah, no, and I think that's an accurate way to describe it. When I was in the psych ward, it really, obviously I haven't been arrested, so I don't know what a jail cell feels like, but it certainly wasn't all that fun. I don't know if it was the same for you, but like I couldn't go outside for my entire stay, and it did just really feel like a jail to me. I didn't have to get put in solitary confinement, so I don't really know what that experience is like, but it did just feel like you were locked down, like you were a criminal.
Yeah, it was sterile and like gross and old, and like I recall there being a little bit of blood left over like on the cotton sheet that was on the like bed cot thing. And like who knows if I hallucinated that or not. I don't know. This seems very unsanitary.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember it just being like I was just pissed. I was
Yeah.
just mad at that time. And so the lady came in with, she had like two guards next to her, like actual, they had like police uniforms or sheriff uniforms or whatever, like guards next to her. And she said, I'm going to give you a choice. You can take this medicine, or we can inject it in you. And that's your choice. Which would you like to do? And I was like, I'm not taking your fucking medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guys just came, one arm, the other arm, like they were very strong. And I just remember like just crying and just yelling at them that they didn't have to be so rough, and they didn't have to treat me like a criminal, and that this wasn't right. And like, is this justice? And like everything dramatic that I could think of, you know? And they just held me down until somebody injected me, and then I blocked out. So, and then they transferred me in an ambulance, or so they tell me, my mom tells me, to a different psych hospital because they didn't have room in that one. So a nearby psych hospital. And I was there for a week. It was a lot better than the ER. It was like really nice nurses. My mom she used to be a nurse. She was a dialysis nurse for 17 years, and she just advocated for me so hard. She would talk to all the nurses and like check in daily, like make sure to ask, like, what's the next step? What's the next step? What does she need to do to get out of here? What do we need to do to make sure that she's okay before she leaves? And so like my parents weren't just trying to get me out. They're trying to get me out like at the best time, you know, like give me enough time to really get the medicine to work. And they were encouraging me to take medication and talking to the doctors to like understand what was happening.
Yeah, I really liked the Instagram post where you talk, I forget the exact name of the post. Oh, actually, I have it written down. It was called Bad Place, the Instagram post. And it's, it was kind of exactly how you described it, how it was so traumatic, but also in the post, you really sort of reflected on how in that moment, like in retrospect, you can look at like my body did need medication in that state. So when were you able to kind of accept that, like, hey, I need medication for this condition?
Yeah, so when I was in the psych ward at Berkeley, which was the second one for a week, I really, really struggled, and I only took it because I trust my parents and because I trust my I had other family that was like flew up from LA who are like really close to my parents to like come and be with them to really support them, but like would also support me. And my friends, I had some of my closest friends call in to the hospital and they would listen to me. They would listen to me talk about my delusional stuff. And then at the end of the message, or like, as we were wrapping up, they would just like hammer in the point that I just had to take my medication. And that's how I was going to get out. And like everybody's message was like, you need to take medication to get out of here. Like that was my incentive, was to get out of the psych ward. And so I had to take the medication, and then they set up, my dad flew in because he had to work, but he flew in at one point during it, like a couple days in. After talking to the doctor, he sat down and his talk to me was really the turning point. He was like, Julia, I'm your dad. I've lived with you your whole life. You know this, like, remember this. And he waited until I was like, yeah, I remember. I know you love me. He's like, okay, now you know that. To get out of here, you need to take the medication, and it's the best thing for you. I know you don't want to do it, but just take the medication. And like with his intensity, he can get really intense. And they had set up like an escape plan for me, an aftercare program in LA. And I would go stay with my aunt and uncle, and my mom would stay with me. and I would go to an aftercare program where we could, ask all the questions we wanted about medication and really go like get some good professional help, but also like not be caged up.
Yeah.
I could go to the beach, I could go to Disneyland, they like really incentivized me. And so I was like, okay, I'll take the medication. And so I took it to start with for my family. And over the time of me coming down out of psychosis and to reality and talking to professionals and just having those like conversations over and over and over again, I finally was like, okay, I will take medication for a few months. And then over those few months, I realized, okay, I'll keep taking it for maybe a year. And now I don't want to stop taking it.
Yeah. Well, and I really remember kind of that state of mind where when I was in the psych ward, all I wanted to do was leave. It wasn't a fun experience. I'm glad I went. In full honesty, it sounds like my experience was much less traumatic. I didn't have to be held down or anything. And, I was very lucky in that state. But all I wanted to do was leave. But I want to see if you agree with this statement. Really, the hardest experience for me wasn't necessarily the psych ward, it was leaving the psych ward. Because when I was in the psych ward, at least I had people around me that were going through something similar. And once I left the psych ward, that's when I really felt all alone. I felt like such a weirdo, felt like no one really understood what I had just gone through. And I also went into like an aftercare sort of program, but it was only really a week. It was very minute. It was better than the psych ward, but I just fell into a deep, deep state of depression that really was built around that isolation.
So something that my therapist says that I'm really good at is reaching out. And I think that like for me, I just wanted to get the hell out of there because it's really hard to be around other people who are psychotic and other people who are manic. I had a roommate who was actually quote unquote super normal. She was depressed and she was like a mom and she had wanted to commit suicide, so she had checked herself in, and then after being there seeing the rest of us, she was like, okay, I don't want to be here anymore.
Yeah.
And she went home after a couple of days. But besides her, like it was just really sad seeing everybody else in their states. I'm sure some people thought it was sad to see me in my state, but it's not really fun for me to be around that stuff. And leaving was a blessing. Mm-hmm. And I was really lucky because I was with my mom and I had some friends down in LA. I have like a little network in LA that was there. And I connected with some of the people in my aftercare, but also aftercare was kind of the same thing, not as intense as the psych ward, but I didn't really make like long life friends in my aftercare program because everybody's just dealing with the hardest stuff of their life.
Yeah.
But I think I just really leaned on my friends and family, and I called a lot of people. I kind of started with apologizing to a lot of people for like my friends down in on that trip, but also like other acquaintances, like random people that I had like text message like about like weird like delusional stuff. Mm-hmm. I just like reached out to them. I said, I'm really sorry, like I had this weird thing, and like it made me feel so much better. To just
and like, when you were texting those people, especially the people you didn't really know well and your close friends, did you tell them, hey, I'm sorry I acted like an idiot, I was manic, or did you explain it in some other respect?
I think that what I did was it depended on the person, and some people like I was never going to talk to them again. I just felt like they deserved like an explanation for like why I was like such a random weirdo. And like I never did anything horrible or anything, but like I was just like, I don't know, I just did out of character stuff. Met people, like there were some people that I met that like would want to like still have a relationship with manic me, but like that's not me, Mm-hmm. So I just I think I think I just said, like, I'm really sorry. Like, it actually turns out that I was having, yeah, I think I said I was having a manic episode. I didn't know that I have bipolar disorder, but like, I hope that you're not too offended or whatever, or like, I hope you can understand and like, whatever. I didn't have to do that for everybody, but there's just some nagging people. I just felt like they deserve a little bit of an explanation, you know?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think from the very beginning, I was just really just, I never, so part of your podcast was saying that like people like warned you about telling the truth, like about your mental illness. Like,
Certainly.
and like, I never had that. I don't know. Maybe I did have that. I don't think I had that. I don't think I had people telling me, don't tell anybody. Like,
Well, and yeah, that's a good thing.
yeah, like my family was like, I mean, they're just as big of blabbermouths as me, specifically my dad. And so, like, for me, like having bipolar disorder, like, kind of explains some things, you know, like it's a good way to just explain, you know, why it didn't work for 8 months, you know?
Yeah.
And I just never really felt that bad about it. I feel like sad for myself because this is a really hard thing to go through. Like I was really traumatized and I still deal with a lot of hard stuff, but I don't think I ever really felt super ashamed that like I have a brain like this, which I'm really grateful for.
Yeah, and I think that that's really powerful that your medical professionals had that attitude because it's weird. My shame from bipolar disorder didn't really come from my own thinking. At the very beginning, I actually did want to tell everybody, and my professionals just kind of warned me of the stigma. And it's honestly a big reason why I pursued medical school, because I strongly disagree with the advice that they gave me in that respect. Like I understand the stigma is there, but I think, telling someone that your life could be significantly impacted by this is just the wrong way to approach it. And, we can't expect the stigma to go away unless we start giving patients confidence that they can live normal, amazing lives. And so when I at least got out of the psych ward, I wanted to apologize to my friends for acting like a dumbass, but I almost didn't know how to start that conversation. And I didn't know really about bipolar disorder very much. And like I said, I felt so much shame. Yeah. So now I kind of want to, you posted another post that I really liked on your Instagram was, one thing I think a lot of people have restraint from taking psychiatric medication is weight gain. And I think that's even more significant with females at time. And so you posted about how, some of your psychiatric meds gave you, weight gain that, who likes weight gain? And so how did you continue to take the medication throughout that time? And then how did you also deal with, that weight gain?
Well, specifically this antipsychotics, I would literally I had somebody sneak in the psych ward, like ask this guy who was another patient to have his dad bring in, because his dad was coming to visit, a pack of Oreos, a whole pack of Oreos.
Yeah.
And I literally ate the whole thing. Like that is a powerful drug that will make you crave sugar.
Yeah.
And so I was really depressed about it because I've always been I grew up being a really intense athlete. And so I had also experienced like weight gain in my college years due to just not really working out and drinking a lot. And so I'd kind of already been there, but I hit like a new high. Like I was 190 pounds at my highest.
Yeah.
And I'd never been there before. And so it made me really sad. And it was really hard to deal with, to be honest. But I just like eventually, once I had kind of weaned off of the antipsychotics and I'd gotten really comfortable with my lithium, that took like 5 or 6 months to kind of get to that place. I was just like, I think I just hit a point where I was just like, I am so sick of being fat.
Yeah.
And I just found whenever I'm like really overweight, or not really overweight, but just overweight, and I don't feel strong, I start slow. So I kind of started with like really gentle like, yoga, like going to the yoga where you just sit there and breathe. Like that was an accomplishment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just kind of worked my way up, and then I eventually like kind of worked my way up to like Pilates and like really strengthened my muscle again. I hadn't really used my muscles in a long time.
Yeah.
And that helped. And then just like naturally, whenever my muscles are kind of growing, I get less hungry. So I was eating less, and then I started losing weight. And then eventually I found a program that was it's kind of like a CrossFit program, but not as intense. Like it's like a kind of more like a home gym. Like
Okay.
it's not the intensity of CrossFit at all, but like has that kind of circuit training thing, which I really like, building muscle and doing cardio at the same time.
Yeah.
So then I transferred. Once I was strong enough, I started doing that, and that was just fun for me. It was also a gym that like I kind of made like I kind of made friends there. Like I like the people there. I'm still there 3 years later, or whatever, 4 years later. And yeah, it was just like, I think it's really important because I've done it a few times, like gained and lost weight when I'm feeling overweight, to just be really gentle and slow and just know it's a long-term game. Oh, that's my phone.
All good.
But it's just like, I just know in my head it's a long-term game, and to not get discouraged, like not go for those immediate results and go really fast and hard. Like I have to go slowly into it, and just like naturally, I've done it so many times that like I'll hit like a barrier where I'm just like, yeah, like I want to work out.
Yeah.
It's a little while to get there.
And like I take a medication called Valproate that, traditionally does cause a lot of people weight gain. But at least in my experience, it was I gained a significant amount of weight, leaving the psych ward and being on this medication. But it's really unfair for me to attribute my weight gain specifically to that medication. I was making bad life choices. I kind of like I would use the medication as an excuse to eat like shit, because I'd be like, oh, well, I'm going to gain weight anyway, no matter what I can do. And, similar to you, I got up to 275, and I was just absolutely disgusted with myself. And so now how I try to frame my thinking as, I know that the valproic acid is, probably retaining more body weight on me, more water weight, whatever it may be. But I almost look at it as a challenge. And I've been able to successfully lose weight despite continuously taking this medication. And so I try to challenge people who do take medication. I know that there oftentimes is side effects of weight gain, but almost look at that as your motivator to get to the gym and like push yourself, because it is possible that you can lose weight, on these meds.
Yeah, lithium. I mean, I know I'm heavier now than I was before, and that I think it's a lot of water weight too, because lithium you retain a lot of water, but I don't know, I've just kind of gotten used to it. And like, I think that it's the same as what you're saying. Like, if you want to have a beach body, go to the gym and kick your butt. Like, I go through phases where I do that, and then phases like right now where I'm just really comfortable and happy being a little bit not beach body.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to now kind of shift to a different, I think, weight gain is obviously a big challenge, when someone's diagnosed, really at any stage, but especially at a younger age when, we're seeking out, sexual partners, long-term partners, whatever it may be. It's just an additional challenge. But also, I was diagnosed when I was 22. You were diagnosed at whatever, 25 is when you entered the psych ward. So most people in your 20s, and, I know not everybody, but a lot of people, at least in my social group of friends, Friday and Saturday nights, we would enjoy ourselves at a bar. We would, or in the mornings, a lot of times we would all drink coffee together and go out to a cool coffee spot, whatever it may be. And both alcohol and caffeine, at least in my experience, the doctors told me, listen, you shouldn't be consuming any of these products. They're just not good for your mental health. Alcohol is a depressant. Caffeine is going to exacerbate a lot of your anxiety and insomnia issues. Just stay away. And, I've learned that I think telling a patient don't consume any of these almost just makes that desire even stronger. Like, oh, well, I want to prove to you, like, I can handle a beer or I can handle a coffee. And over time, I've really had to change how I look at these substances and how I consume these substances, but I still will have a beer and I'll still have a coffee. So what was your experience dealing with these kind of challenges, once you kind of started to properly handle your bipolar disorder?
Yeah, it's been such a journey, because I mean, I was just like a rager in my early 20s, and I don't know, like I love partying. It's so fun. Who doesn't? But I think that just my experience scared me so much that I was like, I can do things to change my lifestyle if it will keep me out of insanity. That's how I look at it. Is like whenever I'm starting to get like I do drink caffeine and I do drink alcohol, but in much more limited forms. Like I don't drink them a lot. Like I substitute coffee. Like for most of the time, I'm drinking like a seltzer water, or a non-caffeinated tea, or like I've had to kind of learn to like those things, but I have over time. Like I do like them, and now I'm kind of like not as even keen on coffee. It's just what you feed your body will get used to it. And then with alcohol, I don't know. I try not to drink a lot, and I don't party as much as I used to. And I also feel like super confident going into like drinking situations and drinking like seltzer water or just something else. I like to have something in my hand. I don't know, just out of like anxiety or something. But I don't feel like I kind of like think of it in a way like I have bipolar disorder. Like I'm already experiencing such like an interesting situation anyways. Like, and I don't feel pressure, especially I'm 30 now. Like there's girls that are getting pregnant. They don't drink. Like nobody wants to drink as much anymore now that I'm old. But in my 20s, it's like it was harder because people do. But I did explain to people a lot of times, sometimes, like when people would be like, you need to drink, or like, even with drugs, like you need to, like, do you want a Coke or whatever? A Coke. Do you want Coke? Yeah. I feel like I sound like such an old fuck. If people like offering me weed, I still do it too, where I'm just like, no, I'm really sorry. Like it just doesn't really work for my brain.
Yeah.
Or, I wish I could, like, but I just can't. Thanks.
Well, and, in my experience, the doctors kind of told me, like, you should never go out to bars because, of course, they didn't want me to drink anything. And they just said, being out in bars is going to make you drink, yada, yada, yada. And I think that was even bad advice because then it just put me in that isolation. And I think, anytime you're in isolation with a mental health condition, it's just not a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's terrible advice. I think that socializing is so important.
Yeah. So, I still continued, like, I'm a big sports fan. So, like, I loved going out to bars and watching games with my friends and whatever it may be. But over time, what it really evolved to me being able to properly use alcohol is, I really just had to kind of limit myself. When I was very young, I would drink to excess to, blacking out was a regular thing before I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And now anything more than about 3 or 4 beers, like I get such severe hangovers. I know that, the valproic acid is being metabolized in my liver already. And so just adding alcohol on top of that is just even worse. But what I'm trying to say here is I looked at those opportunities when my friends would offer me, hey, you want to do a shot with us right now? Or, hey, you want to keep drinking more? Or whatever it may be. Those were opportunities for me to really educate my friends on, listen, no, like I take medication for this disorder. I would kind of talk about how this medication is already wrecking my liver. And, I probably shouldn't even be drinking at all. But, I enjoy the taste of a good old IPA. I live out in Yakima. That's where like all the hops are grown in this country anyway. And it really was a good opportunity for me to kind of get more comfortable talking about my bipolar disorder and educating the people around me.
I do the same thing. And I think that's really important. Sometimes I say, trust me, you don't want me to drink this.
Yeah. Well, so we've been talking now for about an hour, 20, 15, whatever it may be. So now I kind of want to end this conversation. Imagine that we're talking to ourselves that were just entering that psych ward, or some other person that just got a psychiatric diagnosis and they're scared shitless. I remember when I first got diagnosed, I went on Google, and the only people that I could really find had bipolar disorder were like Jimi Hendrix, Kurt Cobain. Didn't end up too great for either of them. And then also like Demi Lovato. And, it's kind of funny how much inspiration I got from Demi Lovato, this Disney and musician star. But that was really one of the only few people that I could look to that also had bipolar disorder and was very open about it, at least at that time in 2011 or 12. So why I really love doing podcasts with people like you is that I hope people who are just diagnosed can now look to Google and find really inspiring, miraculous stories like this. So what would you want to tell those people, though, that are just getting diagnosed with bipolar disorder?
I wish I had somebody to tell me when I was back there that everything was going to work out and I was going to have a life and I was going to have a fulfilling life. I was really, really worried that I would never have the things that I wanted, a career, a boyfriend, all the things that you hope and wish for. I thought it could be over. And I was so anxious about that. But like, here I am now 5 years later, and I'm super fulfilled. I have worked really hard, and I'm really serious about my treatment, but I have just kept the doors open for opportunity, and kept growing, and slowly but surely I've created a life for myself that I'm really happy with. And so to anybody out there who is just coming out of psych ward, just know that just keep reaching, making moves towards the things that you want, and you're going to be okay.
Well, I think that's great advice. And I remember, at least when I was first diagnosed, I just thought wow, my life is over now. I'm not going to be able to accomplish anything. Certainly no woman is ever going to want to date me because I have a psychiatric condition. I just felt like I was a loser. And so what I would tell those people is kind of my life is so much better now being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Being medicated has allowed me, and seeking out therapy, going to the gym, regularly meditating, it allows me to be so much more productive and accomplish things that I couldn't even imagine prior to being diagnosed. I was able to have a successful relationship that, I'm a married man now, and your life can get better, properly treating your mental health condition.
Yeah. It's just you just got to keep the doors open and stay hopeful, and just know that, life is going to go on, and that also stigma, just ignore it. I don't know. I feel bad that so many people, maybe it's because, I'm sure there's a lot of people who experience stigma from, their close network, which would be really hard. But just know that having bipolar disorder is fine.
Yeah.
You can have totally fulfilling lives and do really cool stuff. And you don't have to be that person that just never, you can accomplish things, that's what I'm trying to say.
Well, and we're both young people, I'm coming up on 30, whatever. We're both right around the same age. So I think a lot of the medical professionals that I saw, they're in their 50s or 60s. And where they were, 30 years ago, the stigma was maybe significantly worse. But where it is today, it's really not that bad. Out of all the interactions I've had with being public about my bipolar disorder, I would say less than 1% of the reactions are negative. And, I've experienced some dumbasses that, of course, have told me, don't take my psych pills, or you're just a zombie, or you're a crazy idiot, or whatever, for believing in that diagnosis. But the vast, vast majority has been positive. So especially, when I wish someone told me when I was first diagnosed, you should tell people. This is nothing to be ashamed of. Just tell everybody. at least all the people that you feel comfortable telling. You know, like I almost make analogies to, you know, someone who's living in the closet about their homosexuality. Like you're going to live a healthier lifestyle being open about this. And it's just something that you're not ashamed of. It's much healthier to live this way.
Yeah. It's really nice to be able to say, like, I don't know, like I use it to explain most of the time. That's usually when I'm like tell people, is when it becomes pertinent enough in a conversation, a relationship, where I kind of have to explain something to them. Like to my employer, like this just recently happened this summer. Like I had to tell her because I had to take a couple days off, and like she was like, well, what can we do to like help you like make your commitments? And I was like, trust me, I want to make my commitments, but it's better for all of us if I just take a couple of days off, because I could flip into a huge episode.
Yeah.
And
well,
like,
go ahead.
That's like the new age that we live in. Like 30 years ago, you could not tell an employer that.
No. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's still like depending on the situation, but like I feel like it's really important to like foster those relationships and like foster like this. I don't tell people too early usually.
Yeah. I've made that mistake one too many times.
Me, and then like if it's like, hey, like drink a whole bunch, then I'll say, actually, like I have bipolar disorder, so I can't. I especially use it with weed because I live in Washington State, of course.
Yeah.
Wants me to smoke weed, and I'm like, well, I have bipolar disorder, so I don't really smoke weed.
Yeah. Well, Julia, I've really enjoyed talking to you today. This has been super fun. I had, a ton of other notes of things I wanted to talk to you about, but, we're coming up on about an hour and 20 minutes. So I'd actually like to have you back on the show because this was such a fun conversation today. And so if the listeners, liked this conversation, I'm sure they did, how would be the best way that they could follow some of your work?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for having me too, Logan. This has been really, really fun for me. I love talking about this stuff. And if listeners want to connect with me, the best way to connect is Julia is on Instagram at Julia_lives_bipolar. I have a website as well that outlines all my stories so that they're a little bit easier to read and they're in order, so chronologically. And that's at julialivesbipolar.com. I also have another Instagram at jstabler. That's just if you're interested in following me as a human.
Okay. And is that more like your fashion sort of blog, I guess?
That's just like me. Like I just, that's my original. And that, yeah, I do. It's just my work, what I do for fun, a little bit of advocacy stuff. Like it's where I just like outline me as a human.
Well, sweet. Well, I'll be sure to link all those in the link for, this podcast. Thanks again for coming on.